Honourable Member for Dartmouth South, Portland Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to begin by welcoming the Minister and her senior staff. This department is very near and dear to my heart, and I must say I've been somewhat reassured by some of the responses the Minister has made to previous speakers in terms of the sincerity she's been displaying in response to the issues raised, and her openness and flexibility in willing to deal with the issues in an ongoing manner, and I really appreciate that. And it's in that spirit that I'll be making my comments and asking questions this afternoon. I'm going to start off a little differently. I'm going to tell you the 3 things I think the department needs to do, and then I'm going to ask some questions and look for some clarification. I was the previous critic for community services for the NDP caucus, and I have to say, over the 3 years that I held that position, I had increasing concern that the mantra of the department seemed to be more about cost containment rather than working across levels of government, working across sectors, across community groups, and involving all those most directly impacted by their policies in developing a genuine social safety net for Nova Scotians. And I really think we need to get back on track, because there are no quick, easy answers to the complex issues, many of which have been actually raised in the department's business plan for the coming year. I don't think the solutions to those problems are totally within the control or ability of the department, which means all the more that the department officials have to be working with the voluntary sector, with consumers and clients, with people within their department, from the frontline workers up to the minister, and involving all departments within government to work on these issues. I'm sure it's no surprise to the minister, but I would suggest probably 75 to 80% of the casework that I do and my assistant does within my constituency office is the result of poor policies or misunderstood policies of her department. And I have to say, only half jokingly, that at times I've been tempted to invoice the Department of Community Services for the wages of my assistant. And I'm thinking that if my assistant and the assistants of all the other MLAs in this province are working as sort of client representatives or navigators or ombudsmen for the clients of community services, then this is a real indication that there's something wrong with the current approach. And I feel, and I've mentioned this within the Standing Committee of Community Services as well to the Deputy, I think the department itself needs to set up a division or a group of people that can work with clients directly in terms of helping them understand what the policies are, what's available to them, helping them navigate the different levels of the department, and acting as a patient representative does in the hospital system. That model works extremely well. It creates a high degree of satisfaction from everyone that's involved with that system. And I really feel that there's a huge void there in the department, and it needs to be met directly by the department because they best understand what can be done, rather than the CAs and community-based groups who are trying to support the clients in the community. So that's my first suggestion. My second suggestion is that there definitely needs to be an improvement of policies and funding rates. And I'll get into that a little further. And the third one is, I think the policies and legislation governing the department needs to have a gender-based analysis. The majority of staff of the department are women. The majority of clients of the department are women. And I'm not sure that anyone fully appreciates how unfairly some of the decisions and the policies of that department impact disproportionately on women compared to male clients. And I think that's an area that needs to be looked at. And again, I'll give some examples in a few minutes. So those, if you get nothing out of what I asked today, please take those three recommendations back to the department. I want to move on to the policies. Unfortunately, and I think it's been raised by earlier speakers, a number of the policies of the Department of Community Services actually discriminate and prevent the clients from doing the very thing that the department is trying to achieve, and that's to increase the independence and stability of families and their productivity, being able to get out to work, and improving their standard of living. And it's interesting. I see in the West Gallery Carolyn Earle, who was actually part of the presentation of the Face of Poverty Coalition to the two-day forum on poverty that was held in January, and I welcome you, Carolyn. During that two-day forum, those of us who even felt we were somewhat informed about the issue of poverty, I think had a very startling awakening to how serious the situation is in Nova Scotia. And a couple of months after that forum, I was asked to do sort of a summary of the information and recommendations presented to the forum for all the community health boards in the Capital District. And it was interesting because when I went through a number of the presentations, I would say that probably 3/4 of the recommendations coming from a broad collection of coalitions and community-based organizations, as well as individuals who have been impacted by poverty, I would say about 3/4 of the recommendations dealt with changes they'd like to see in policies of the Department of Community Services. And it was startling, I think, to all of us. And I won't go into the details because, as the Minister well knows, the Standing Committee on Community Services sort of shortlisted some of the recommendations that they felt should have been included in the spring budget. And the responses back from various ministers whose responsibility it would have been to include those in the budget, their department budgets, basically the answer was no. Even though these recommendations made sense, they would prevent the downward spiraling of many women and children in our province into further poverty. And at some point, we have to say stop. And so I guess my first question to the Minister is, how open are you and your department officials to looking at the policies of the department to see which actually prevent your clients from getting on with their lives?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I'd like to thank and acknowledge my honourable colleagues' work that we did together in a short time that we had on that Standing Committee on Community Services. And Mr. Chair, I know, as all members of this House know, my honourable colleague does so with the best of intentions and with the true with a true heart full of sincerity. It is not for political gain. It is not for any personal gain. It is out of a true commitment, and I respect and recognize that publicly for all members of this House. And indeed, under her chairmanship, we certainly did attack and approach various aspects, and certainly I now, in my capacity as minister, look forward to moving some of those perhaps onto my own plate, and would welcome the opportunity, as I have reviewed numerous documents in the last couple of weeks. I indeed did review some of the information that came from the Standing Committee, because I was looking at it with a different set of eyes this time. And I certainly wanted to have a fresh look at that. And I would welcome the opportunity if my honourable colleague could find, we spoke about time earlier, but if my honourable colleague could find time to sit down with me and walk me through some of those areas that she felt the committee had indicated as priority. And Mr. Chair, I would like, I'm going to ask clarification on one thing from my honourable colleague, because one of my trusty sidekicks might have gotten it, but I didn't quite get the second of her three that she wanted me to go away with. I know it was pertaining to funding, but I wanted to make sure I had the exact words, so when I leave here, I make sure that I am indeed on the right track on that one. So if I could have clarification on the second, then I'd like to address the question regarding the gender policy.
The honourable member for Dartmouth South, Portland Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the order I gave them was working towards a genuine social safety net, the need to improve policies and funding rates, and the third was the gender lens on policies and legislation.
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to my honourable colleague. It was the funding rates that I had only got half of my shorthand down on the page. And Mr. Chair, to my colleague's inquiry regarding the gender balance with regard to policy, again, I have to acknowledge that a lot of the policy in the department I haven't had the opportunity to fully digest, because it is still such a learning curve. But certainly, I always remind anyone who knows me knows that when I attack a subject or go about a project or take on, whether it's a political commitment or a community commitment, I do so as a proud individual. And I always ask people to look at me first and foremost as a capable, competent individual, and then to factor in my gender if it pertains. And sometimes that you're able to do that, Mr. Chair, and sometimes it doesn't quite work that way. Certainly, I would not want to indicate to my honourable colleague that in any way, shape, or form would I accept policy that was gender biased. And if indeed policy does exist within the department that is gender biased, I certainly would like to become more familiar with all of the policy in the days ahead. And I do know that policy is reviewed on a regular basis, and indeed it's being reviewed as we speak, as to under the umbrella of a whole review of different aspects of the department. So I will be watching very closely to ensure that some of those specifics that my honourable colleague indicated, certainly if we can rectify any of those and ensure that gender balance is in place in those policies, we certainly will do so, Mr. Chair.
The honourable member for Dartmouth South, Portland Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do want to move on, but I just want to mention to the Minister, when I'm talking about gender-based analysis, I'm not necessarily talking about bias. I guess it's more on how the policy impacts differently on men and women. So just to give you an example of something, let's look at the new policy of the department that does not allow single parents to attend training institutions or universities for courses longer than 2 years. The gender imbalance there is that 80% of the 41% of lone parent families supported by the department are headed up by women. So a policy such as that prevents more women from going on to get university education than it does men. So that's the kind of unintended consequence that could be discovered by putting sort of a gender lens on policies and interpretations and legislation before it actually has that negative impact. And when you consider that the majority of the caseload in your department are women, and most of those women have children, it also increases the poverty level of the children in those single parent families. And that actually leads to my next question, and that's about child poverty in our province. It was interesting, even in the department's own business plan for this year, you admit, you in the general sense, your department admits that there are 2,000 more children living in poverty in Nova Scotia than when the Conservative government took over in 1999. Now, I would be bold, but I will suggest that part of that is because of the policies of the Department of Community Services. And it's interesting because later in the business plan, it mentions that the Nova Scotia, department or Nova Scotia government, probably the Department of Community Services, is actually the lead province for the evaluation of the National Child Benefit Program, which was started federally in 2001. And the business plan for this year from your department suggests that the evaluation of the federal National Child Benefit Program, that the evaluation will show positive results for low-income families. So I guess I'm wondering if the federal plan is improving results for low-income families, yet more children in Nova Scotia are living in poverty. Why the disconnect? Where's the problem?
The Honourable Minister, Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I apologize to my honourable colleague, but I'm wondering if she can clarify for me the additional 2,000 children that you're referencing in the business plan. Please, thank you.
The Honourable Member for Dartmouth South, Portland Valley.
Chair, the minister will find that information, I believe it's on page 5.
The Honourable Minister of Community Services. Pardon me. The Honourable Member for Dartmouth South, Portland Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to elaborate, if you look at the 1999 figure, 24,000 children under the age of 18 were in low-income households, and the 2003 figure shows 26,000 children. And I believe that's an increase of 2,000.
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to my honourable colleague for pointing out the specific location of that. And indeed, I certainly recognize what she's referencing now. And we indeed do use those factors in as a component to the creation and evaluation of such programming as the income, the rate, the increase, the $10 a month increase for income assistance, the factors that we use for a variety of our programming, and so that indeed is calculated in there. With reference to the National Child Benefit and the Nova Scotia Child Benefit, as I stated earlier, the two together, I understand, are what are considered to be an amount equal to the national average for raising a child in Nova Scotia, or indeed in Canada, in both, Mr. Chair.
The honourable member for Dartmouth South, Portland Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. But I think that proves my point, is that the two combined together do not allow children in this province to be raised in dignity and have an adequate or reasonable quality of life. Between 40 and 50% of the food bank users in our province, not that they physically go, but they're the ones who benefit from the food received from the food banks in our province, that food goes to children under the age of 18, between 40 and 50%, and those are figures that come from Feed Nova Scotia. The loss of the child allowance, or the capacity for the department to add that in to the rates that families on social assistance in this province receive, is not added. I mean, that loss is being felt by families, and children in this province, their parents or parent are forced to go to food banks to supplement the personal allowance. And so, despite the fact that, you know, it's been a very small increase each year over the last couple of years, that in no way meets the nutritional standards necessary to raise healthy children in this province. So I'm wondering if the minister would like to comment on that, and if it might be more motivation to raise the personal allowances or bring back the children's allowance portion of social assistance rates.
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I guess I would make a couple of comments to my honourable colleague's question. It's my understanding that the creation of the Nova Scotia Child Benefit was indeed to remove the child as a factor in the income assistance rates or monthly allowance, and treat that as a separate, so that it's not used as a disadvantage, if you will, toward the monthly allowance, and so therefore that was done in a manner to offset and not penalize, if you will, Mr. Chair, the children of the families looking for income assistance. And as I stated earlier, and I know my honourable colleague is well aware, when we see the passage of this budget, Mr. Chair, the third year in a row for an increase in the personal income allowance is something that I'm very pleased to be able to come to the floor of this legislature in my very first mandate and be able to bring forward. And that $10 a month increase, which is, as I say, the third consecutive year of increase, certainly is something that I'm very pleased to be able to do, and something that is very welcome in amongst our income assistance clients, Mr. Chair. And I know that it would be in everyone's interest to increase everything if we could, Mr. Chair, if such a world existed. But certainly, keeping within our means and being able to provide the maximum for our clients is certainly a priority for me. And as we move forward in the days to come, certainly taking into consideration each one of those increases, along with the shelter increase and the other programs that we're able to put in place, certainly would hope to help bridge some of that gap. The other thing that I hope to get an opportunity, and I don't want to take all my honourable colleagues' time, the other thing I hope to have an opportunity to discuss with my honourable colleague and other colleagues in this House is the PharmaCare program for children, which again is another program that we can use, that we can maximize the assistance that's able to be provided to our clients, to those Nova Scotians who are most in need of our assistance. And it's one that I think can be used, Mr. Chair, in a very positive way. 33,000 children in Nova Scotia will be able to now their parents, of course, will be able to now access that medication through the pharmacare program, which allows them to better use those funds in other areas that they see fit. So again, it's another program, Mr. Chair, that we're able to introduce and bring forward that will hopefully alleviate some of those other concerns and additional burdens for the parents.
The Honourable Member for Dartmouth South, Portland Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I recognize where the minister's trying to go with that, but actually that program's going to benefit the children of modest income families in Nova Scotia, and that's a worthy goal. Currently, I'm talking about the children of the lowest income families in our province, those families who are directly the responsibility of the Department of Community Services. Before I leave this, I just want to give you an example. The minister may be aware that some excellent research work has come out of an initiative that's been coordinated by 3 of the women's centres in Nova Scotia. And the initiative's called the Social Assistance Reform, Moving Forward a Woman-Positive Public Policy Agenda. And their information indicates that for a lone parent, and I've already suggested that most of those under the purview of the department are women, so single parent, single mother families. Currently, the National Child Benefit Supplement would be $143.50. The Nova Scotia Child Benefit, $37.06. This coming year, the national benefit will go up to $162. The Nova Scotia Child Benefit remains at $37.08. I just mentioned that because that does not replace the amount of money necessary to raise a child in this province, especially if you're handicapped by, which is often the case, and the department's own business plan refers to this. There are complex problems with these families. It's just not inadequacy of income. If you're poor in this province, you tend to have poorer health, you tend to have lower levels of education. In fact, a middle income person in this province is twice as healthy as a low income person. A high income person is twice as healthy as a middle income person. I would suggest, and it's been proven in many other documents, I would suggest that the adequacy of income and the opportunity to achieve as high a level of education as possible impact more on a person's health than anything else that can be done in this province. And that's where I'm concerned about the policies of the Department of Community Services, because I feel that they perpetuate poverty and poor health in our province, and we know that the health budget is it's almost out of control. But you're not going to turn that around by investing everything in health promotion in terms of personal lifestyles. You've got to invest in education and improving people's income. That's where you can make a real difference and stop this out of control growth and demand for healthcare services. So instead of, as has been my experience, the Department of Community Services and the Department of Health often fighting over who does not want to take responsibility for looking after an individual or a family, there has to be closer cooperation and recognition that investment on one side is going to lower the costs on the other side. We need that cross-department approach to our public policy in this province, or we're going to continue going the way we always have. So is the minister prepared to work with her colleagues in other departments to have that sort of population health approach that will take all these factors into account?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to my honourable colleague for the opportunity to address that specific question. It's very interesting that you would raise that question because just yesterday we were discussing setting up the meetings, and there's no question, Mr. Chair, government does not exist in isolation, and departments do not exist in isolation. There is so much interdepartmental reliance that it's necessary. I would suggest that in my case, it's very pertinent and very immediate that I get together with my colleagues. Certainly the Department of Health is the very first colleague, and we have those meetings slated for next week. We're also bringing, and I believe that the deputies of my department and the Department of Health met actually yesterday to talk about some of these joint initiatives that we have together. Because, Mr. Chair, my honourable colleague is absolutely right. It's not about whose responsibility it is, because collectively, as government, it is our responsibility. And so the toing and froing of who needs to take responsibility really is almost a moot issue, because it's government collectively, and we can only maximize the dollars, the resources, the personnel, the expertise that we have available to us if indeed we do work together. So certainly the Department of Health, and I know that there are very specific initiatives underway, and through the continuum of care with my honourable colleague from the Department of Health, as well as dealing with the Department of Justice as well, Mr. Chair, I would offer to my colleague, is another one of the key stakeholders that we need to get to the table together with, because so often we are intrinsic in what we do. And of course, the fourth component would be the Office of Health Promotion and Protection, because indeed many of the programs that the Office of Health Promotion and Protection now have responsibility for, and their mandate factors in with the Department of Health, the Department of Community Services, and to a certain degree the Department of Justice. So I fully expect and anticipate meeting with all of those departments, and first and foremost, Mr. Chair, with the Department of Health. And we do have those meetings slated for next week, so we'll move forward on those joint initiatives and come in the coming together of minds and departments as to how we can maximize those resources at our disposal.
The Honourable Member for Dartmouth South, Portland Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I find that very encouraging. Thank you very much. I guess this issue of poverty really underlies so many of the concerns from my caucus, because it is almost the amount of money you make is almost the single determinant in terms of the quality of life that anybody in this province has. And I hope actually the minister will include, and she may have mentioned it, the Department of Education, because we have to provide more opportunities for higher level education for the clients of the Department of Community Services. Because the Advisory Council on the Status of Women have shown time and time again that not only in our province but across Canada, women have to have a higher formal educational level in order to make the same amount of money as a man in each province at a lower. So for example, a woman with a degree, a university degree in Nova Scotia, makes about as much money on average as a male high school graduate. So, you know, we have that income gap there to make up. So when you have policies of the Department of Community Services that prevent women from getting university degrees, then they are locked into a cycle of poverty and often, you know, depression and poor health and everything that goes with that for their life, and often continues on till the next generation. Certainly in third world development countries, they have found out that by educating the mother, you have the best chance, you maximize the possibility that the children will go on to further education. So, you know, there's no reason why we can't be taking that international research and applying it here in Nova Scotia. So I'd like, through you, Mr. Chair, to ask the Minister, would she work to convince her Cabinet colleagues to allow us to debate and to vote on a bill that would allow women who are, single parents in this province to continue on to take university education and be able to break that lock on the poverty cycle. Thank you.
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and my honourable colleague brings forth a few items in that in that question, and absolutely, how remiss of me to leave out the Department of Education, one that's near and dear to my heart. Certainly, the Department of Education would be involved, as I've worked cooperatively with the Minister of Education already on a couple of key initiatives that I know, again, are near and dear to the heart of my honourable colleague, and perhaps we'll get a chance to discuss those later on in the questioning if they come up. But I do want to indicate, Mr. Chair, for my honourable colleague's knowledge and those other perhaps newer members in the House, that through the Department of Community Services, we do annually fund through the community college the adult education to the tune of $600,000 a year. So again, we see that cooperative nature between the Department of Community Services and the Department of Education coming together, Mr. Chair, and bringing those two departments together. And as my colleague well knows, there is no single determinant for poverty, and I know that she's fully aware of that, and certainly understands the broader implications. But Mr. Chairman, specifically to my honourable colleague's question, and I wish my honourable colleague who asked me a question earlier were in the room as well. I'm sure word will travel to him. And I'd like to certainly indicate to my honourable colleague that indeed I have instructed staff to provide me with some options, Mr. Chair, that would allow me to investigate the opportunity for income assistant recipients to perhaps pursue educational opportunities beyond a 2-year program. So, Mr. Chair, I'm very pleased to be able to share that with my honourable colleague, again, someone who I know takes these situations very seriously, and I know my honourable colleague's time is very valuable, but I wanted to share a personal reflection, if I could, Mr. Chair, so that my honourable colleague understands my own personal pursuance of this initiative. And Mr. Chair, we all have times in our lives when we're fortunate, and other times when we're perhaps less fortunate. And I can remember quite a few years ago now, a very good friend of mine came to me, and she was at a crossroads in her life. And she was trying to make some very serious decisions. And she felt that those decisions were being impeded by her lack of education and lack of employability. And I remember her saying to me at the kitchen table, "Judy, you're so fortunate. You have an education and you have a career. And if life were to put you in the situation where I am right now, you could make different decisions than I have available to me." Because she did not have an education, she did not have a career. And Mr. Chair, to my honourable colleague, I have colleagues, I see my second colleague is now in the room as well. I've never forgotten that conversation. And while I know that there are some things we're able to do in government and some things that we aren't, I do want to assure my colleagues that that's something that has stayed with me and certainly was instrumental in me asking staff to please provide me with some options and some analysis so that I could move forward with great expediency. And I would hope very quickly to ensure that indeed we do not let any Nova Scotians down, and we do not do a disservice to any Nova Scotians, Mr. Chair. And I certainly hope that my honourable colleague understands the speed at which government moves sometimes, but I want my honourable colleague to know that I am right there behind it, pushing it along as quickly as possible.
Just a reminder to all members in the House when speaking, we're not to draw attention to members that are absent or present in the House. Recognize the honourable member from Dartmouth South, Portland Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, I'm encouraged to hear that. I think so many of these things need to be reviewed because the context has changed. I think the revenue generation of the government has changed. There's all sorts of situations that currently might impact on opening up some of those policies and having a tremendous positive impact on community service clients. So I'm really encouraged to hear that. Just before I leave the topic of training and education for income assistance recipients, I do want to mention to the minister a growing trend, and I'm not sure where this is coming from, but a growing trend among caseworkers to be sort of counseling or pushing their employment support clients into shorter-term programs at the community colleges. And this, I think, is short-sighted. And I'm not blaming the frontline workers for doing this. Again, I think that in the past, there's been, as I called it before, this mantra of cost containment. But if you encourage men and women in particular, because as we know, they make up the majority of the clientele of the department, into short-term programs that are going to continue this cycle of part-time, insecure, low-paying jobs, that is not going to help the government nor the client. It's just going to perpetuate the problem, continue the cycle of, you know, a job for a while, then back on social assistance, out working, back and forth. And that pendulum doesn't help anyone. So we need to invest in the clients, and those who wish to go on for further education have the ability to do it and are accepted by post-secondary institutions for, you know, well-trained or highly skilled programs, and then can go out and become productive members. And we've had all sorts of personal stories through the media over the last several years as various opposition parties have raised this issue in the legislature. We've had all sorts of personal testimonies as to how effective it has been, you know, for men and women to be able to stay on social assistance while they apply, like everyone else, for student loans in order to go to university. And again, I just want to remind everyone that with the wage gap between men and women, we have to ensure that women in particular have these opportunities, because that's the best chance of allowing their children to go on to further education in future generations. I'd like to switch topics now. One of my new critic areas is the Disabled Persons Commission, persons with disabilities. And so I want to look, actually we're going to get down to something specific in the budget, just a little bit of relief from all the philosophy. I'm looking at the line about community-based programming under persons with disabilities. And I noticed that last year nearly $5 million wasn't spent on community-based programming. And I'm wondering why.
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I had actually, when I went through the estimate book myself, I had imagined that I was the one asking the questions, and then sat down with the staff and indeed walked our way through the questions that I had come up with. That was one of the questions I came up with. So my honourable colleague and I were in sync on that one. So I would draw my honourable colleague's attention to the line below, which is the long-term care. And I believe you'll see that one flips for the other. And the long-term care is reflective of the $5 million shortfall that she's indicating in the line above.
The Honourable Member for Dartmouth South, Portland Valley.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if the minister can give me a couple of examples of community-based programs. Let me tell you what I'm assuming here. I'm also the critic for the voluntary sector, and that's my background before I was elected to the legislature. And I know that across this province, community-based programs and services, not only helping people with disabilities, but helping seniors, children, I mean, you name it, they're all, most of them are facing a crisis because there's very little core funding available for these organizations. Many of them are providing almost mandated or essential services that the provincial government is supposed to be providing. In some cases, they're contracted to provide the services. But the lack of core funding, and I could list probably 30 different issues facing the voluntary sector. I guess my concern is, and I'd like to have it clarified, is the change in funding budget lines there, that $5 million, does that mean there's less money for those community-based organizations to provide direct programming to persons with disabilities?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And indeed, the quick, short, and sweet answer is no. It doesn't mean that there is less money, but I want to walk through those three programs because they were the three programs that I learned about upon immediately coming into the department. And they're three programs that after the consultation process took place, there were options and discussions around programs that could immediately respond and receive the full support of all those stakeholders, and others that would take longer to develop. Three of those programs that got the immediate support of all the stakeholders involved in the consultation process are the direct family support, the alternate family support, and the independent living support program. And those three programs themselves, as I referenced in my opening statements, are receiving $1.5 million in this year's estimates in the budget as we move forward. And Mr. Chair, if I may, I'll elaborate on those three programs for my honourable colleague, which she's indicating she's very good with. So I won't waste the time. I'll allow her to ask her next question. If she's good with them, then I'll let her move on.
The Honourable Member for Dartmouth South, Portland Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate your understanding of how short of time I am, and there are a number of points I still want to make. I understood that those three programs were meant to originally be part of last year's budget. So are you suggesting that the funding for those has been deferred to this year? Because I know one of them was scheduled to begin in April. I think that was the alternative family support. Even in the business plan, it says it was, I know those were recommendations, and I think a lot of us thought they were going to start in the last fiscal year. But according to the business plan, they're really just starting this year. So I'm wondering, was that money deferred from one year to another, or is this new money? Thank you.
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And indeed, the total budget for those programs is $3.5 million, and the $1.5 additional dollars this year certainly phases in the implementation of all three programs. Especially the independent living program, which was started as a pilot in Cape Breton, will now be provided across the province in an attempt to broaden the scope of this very successful program. So indeed, it's not a deferral, it is a $1.5 million addition. It started with one, then went one, and now an additional $1.5 million, Mr. Chair.
The Honourable Member for Dartmouth South, Portland Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Does the minister or her staff have any idea how many additional clients that's going to serve in the coming year under the umbrella of those three new programs?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I will indicate to my honourable colleague that at this stage, I do not know an exact number. of how many additional clients that will serve, because of course it's all relative, and the uptake and the application process as we move forward with the 3 programs, we'll have a better understanding. Certainly this time next year, we'll have a better understanding as to what the uptake was. So if indeed numbers become available, I'd be more than happy to share those with my honourable colleague as they become available to us. But at this point in time, Mr. Chair, I don't have a total number figure.
The honourable member for Dartmouth South Portland Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Last year, some of us had meetings with department staff, I think on the regional level. And I was startled to find out that even within the Capital District, I'm not sure what your department calls the metro area, but I was startled to find out that 100 people who qualified, people with disabilities, who qualified for housing and financial supports through your programs were on waiting lists. And I was told that even though people need the program or placement and qualify, they meet the criteria, that it's all, whether or not they get the program they need depends on the amount of money available, that they're not, quote, entitled to that program or service. So I'm curious to know, do we have any idea how many people with disabilities qualify for department programs either in Metro or across the province who are on waiting lists and not able, because of financial restrictions, to get the programs and services that they require?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And certainly a very honest question, but a very complex one. When I consider the variety of programs that are available and that are offered, for example, there would be no wait list for income assistance, for example, for persons with disabilities. So that program would have a 0 wait list, yet there may be other programs, depending on the uptake of the program, that perhaps may have a case where we don't have the immediate facilities. Some of our adult day programs, as my honourable colleague well knows, we're in an analysis of those right now to see how we can better serve all of our clientele here in the central region as well as across the province. So it really does depend, Mr. Chair, on the program that we're referencing, and where some would have virtually no wait list, others may have a waiting period. And so every additional dollar that we can put into these programs, like the $1.5 million going into these 3 programs that are community driven, that are at the heart of those persons who most need our assistance, every dollar we can put in there, Mr. Chair, is a well-deserved dollar. So certainly we would be working to eliminate the waiting for any of our programs, but as we go forward, certainly we'll have the ebb and flow as we work our way through the release of some program max out into the availability of other programs.
The honourable member for Dartmouth South Portland Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to respond by suggesting that perhaps in future business plans, when you have your evaluation or measurements at the end of the report, it would be very useful to have not only the numbers being served by individual programs covered by your department, but also to have the number of people who qualify for them that are on the waiting list. I think that would give us a true measure of the need in our province, and I think it might increase awareness not only among the Legislative Assembly but also among the general public, just as publishing the wait times for different procedures and whatnot on the health field. You know, if social programs needs a higher priority in terms of budgets in this province, then I think we need that baseline information to be able to make those decisions. I just want to quickly move on in my last few moments to bring 2 other issues to the Minister's attention. I just want to refer quickly to concerns that the voluntary sector organizations that either work with her department or who are partially funded by her department. I think we need a big improvement in the working relationship there. And again, if we do have a chance to meet, this might be something we could discuss, one-to-one and with your senior staff. There seems to be an element of distrust, and the two partners have to work together. The department can't deliver the community-based services without these organizations. The organizations can't do it without financial and in-kind support and contributions from the department. And I'm still not clear on how the new Minister of Volunteerism, how that process is going to work. But I think of all the departments in government, community services would be most impacted if we lost that community infrastructure that helps work with clients or children in care or children at risk in our community. So I'll just leave that issue there. The other one I want to mention, and I'm not sure how much the Minister knows about this, I have to admit it's taken me a while to fully appreciate the significance of it. But there's an initiative sponsored mostly by women's organizations in the province who are really concerned about changes in the agreement between the federal government, provincial governments around equalization payments and whatnot in terms of how it impacts on the Canada social transfer. And I remember raising this with the previous minister a couple of budgets ago. And I'm not going to expect the minister to give me a detailed response, but definitely her department has a mandate to secure a safety net for Nova Scotians. And to do it, we don't have enough revenue within our province, so we definitely rely on the federal transfers to do that. In our province, the social transfer, Canada social transfer money, I think goes to social assistance, post-secondary education, legal aid, child welfare, some of those things. But they're, unlike the Canada Health Act, there's no sort of security in terms of amount. There are no standards in place. And this coalition of women's organizations has been trying to get a meeting with both the Premier, who I believe is Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs, and also with the staff or secretariat, whoever does the negotiations with the federal government, because they want to bring their concerns to the table. And they'd like to see this raised, even possibly at the next Premier's meeting in Newfoundland in July. I'm raising it with you, Madam Minister, because I think the chronic underfunding of that Canada Social Transfer impacts mostly on your department. And when the funding arrangement changed about 10 years ago, billions of dollars were taken out of the funding across Canada. And if that, even the inadequate funding that we currently get, if that's at risk and not safeguarded for social programs, then I think the kind of province in Canada, that country that we're currently living in, will change drastically. So I would just ask for some reassurance from the minister, through you, Mr. Chair, that she will raise this issue with the Premier and her senior officials, and perhaps facilitate a meeting between this coalition and those who have responsibility to add items to the agenda and make sure that information is passed on.
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And yet, once again, my honourable colleague and I are in sync. There are a few things that my honourable colleague referenced, and I will make reference to those quickly. Certainly, building relationships is absolutely imperative. And as I indicated earlier to one of the other members opposite, I fully intend and I commit to building relationships with the stakeholders, with the volunteers, with staff, indeed with all of the the service providers, et cetera, across the province that pertain to my department. And certainly I look forward to building those relationships, and I couldn't agree more that the volunteer sector especially is one upon which we rely heavily, and we cannot ever underestimate or downplay their significant contribution. So I certainly commit to my honourable colleague that that's something that definitely is on my priority list. As well, I do know that it is a priority of the department with regards to the Canada Social Transfer that be a priority at our federal, provincial, and territorial meetings. I know that the department certainly has indicated that in my briefings, that is a priority for them and indeed our counterparts across the country. And I know that our own Premier has certainly championed the fiscal imbalance negotiations, the fiscal imbalance question. And I have complete faith that the Premier will continue to move forward for all of Nova Scotia's best interests. And the particular group that my honourable colleague referenced, I actually asked my staff just yesterday to please get in touch with that group of individuals that you were mentioning. I know that they would like to have a meeting before the meeting the end of July. I spoke with the Honourable the Deputy Premier about this yesterday, and indeed did indicate to my staff that I first and foremost would definitely like an opportunity to sit down and hear the concerns that they have as they pertain to the Canada Social Transfer. And I certainly hope that that meeting can take place before the meeting at the end of July, so that indeed I can share that the results of that with the Premier and the Deputy Premier.
Order. Time has expired for the member speaking. I will now recognize the honourable member for Digby-Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister. I appreciate the challenge that you have in this department, but I also appreciate the challenge that some of the people who need this service in this province, and especially in my riding, I certainly get many phone calls about community service, and I know there's only so much to go around, and it has to be divided, hopefully equally and fairly amongst those clients as best as your department can do, and I'm sure you do that. And and I'm sure you know all the problems that are out there, or if you don't, you will. But I'd like to speak on people with disabilities. I know that I've been told by people with disabilities, and I don't know how true this is. This is why I'm here today asking these questions, I guess. People with disabilities seem to have been let down as of lately, receiving less money probably than they used to. Because I'm going to ask you if you could provide me with for a single person with disability, the rate of their shelter allowance, the personal allowance rate, and the transportation allowance rate as of today. And could you also please indicate or provide me at a later time, probably, maybe not today, whenever, these same rates for shelter, personal allowance, and transport allowances under the previous Assistance Act, Social Assistance Act. Before the act was changed, probably 2 years ago maybe. If I could have that information, it would be a great help to me. And I also want to note, during the election campaign, your party indicated that you were bringing forward a new Persons with Disability allowance that recognized that many Nova Scotians are unable to work due to permanent disabilities. So that question is, could the minister please provide some background on this particular allowance, and when it will be available?
The Honourable, the Minister of Community Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to my honourable colleague. I welcome his questions and his comments, and indeed his insight into some of these very challenging situations. And indeed, he is correct. I don't know all of the problems yet, but I'm sure that they will come to me in all due time. Certainly, the figures that you requested, staff will investigate those, and I will get those to you at the earliest availability. I will provide those specific dollar figures to you. I don't have them right now. Certainly hope my honourable colleague appreciates that I will get them to him as soon as possible. And certainly within the platform document, Mr. Chair, that indicates the establishment of the new Persons with Disabilities Allowance, that is indeed a future endeavour through this government, and it's one that we will piece together in the days to come. It's a work in progress as we speak. It is not in this year's budget estimates, as it's in the platform policy. It will come in the days ahead, and certainly as we build that with our stakeholders and in consultation with those who know best, we will make the parameters and the protocols available to all members of this House and indeed all Nova Scotians.
The Honourable Member for Digby Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Minister. That would be great if I could have that information. I'd certainly, I need that in front of me when the calls come in. Another commitment that your party made during the election was was for the department to stop the clawback of the Canada Pension Plan disability benefits. There was supposed to be no more clawbacks. That was, I believe, in your party's platform. If someone received Canada Pension, or so much, I'm not sure about the size of the figures, that no money would be clawed back due to that money coming from the federal government. Could the minister please indicate whether the plan is to stop the clawback and then reduce the benefits your department provides, or whether individuals will see more money under the commitment that you've made?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and again, thank you to my honourable colleague for raising this additional platform commitment. And much the same as the first platform commitment, it is a work in progress as to how the specifics will be worked out. Certainly the experts, the financial experts will look at this, and we will, together with the federal government and with our experts, bring forward the policy and the protocols as they pertain to this particular commitment. And Mr. Chair, if I may, I recognize the challenge that it is for our clients to be faced with overpayments, or and then be faced with the necessity to repay that money. And it's difficult for our clients to be faced with that. And all too often, we know that the struggle is there once money has been allocated to then have to repay it. So certainly that would be something that we would not want to increase or to encourage. So we recognize that that is a situation which exists, and certainly that would not be something we'd want to continue or to increase, Mr. Chair. So as those policies and protocols again become available, I certainly will make them available to all members of this House, and indeed as the government moves forward with its platform commitments, we'll make clear what that project entails.
The Honourable Member for Digby Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to touch on funding that the department used to have in place, which I don't believe it is anymore, and it was at the local level too. It was an emergency funding funding for things like when you have people come into your office in the wintertime as an MLA, and I'm sure the minister's had the same thing happen to her. When people are out of oil on cold days and you're looking for $100 for oil for them, or if you're looking for, they're going to have their hydro cut off in 20 days or 10 days or 5 days, and they're out of food. The first thing you have to do is oil. I've called local oil companies and trying to get these people help, and they'll direct me to the Department of Community Services, which you run into a blank or run into a wall because there is no emergency funding for that. So you end up calling like the Salvation Army. You end up calling some local churches, you know. Should an MLA be doing this? I don't know, but that's the things that I do personally as an MLA, to try to find somebody $100 worth of oil or try to get some help with their electricity. I end up calling Nova Scotia Power and trying to get a person there to help me out to not cut their hydro off for a few days or a few weeks, to help them work out a bill of some sort, which sometimes you can do that, but there's sometimes you can't. And the food, they're out of food, no place to go, and you certainly, it'd be no good calling Sobeys or the Superstore for them. But you end up sending them to the food bank, and then you have to call around and find the person who's running the food bank to go in at a time they're not even supposed to be in there to get them some food. I'm sure we've all done that, all members of this House. I know I have in my short time at it. But there used to be an emergency funding there, and I believe probably it got abused to a point where maybe it had to be stopped. But the people that I've tried to help out at this, I know that they were out. They were out of food, they were out of oil, and they were out of electricity. And I know that those people that I personally helped were not out to abuse the system. And if you know the people in your community, a lot of them, you know who the people are who do abuse that system, I believe. In the 3 years I've been at it, I've learned who will abuse and who won't. And I'm sure the longer you go at it, the more you can learn of these people. And I don't see, if it's carefully watched, it wouldn't be abused, I don't think, the way it was. So my question is there, I guess, has this department had any other complaints from any other MLAs about this emergency funding? And if so, is it something the department is looking at to maybe reestablish to help these people out in emergency situations?
Of Community Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to my honourable colleague for bringing up something that certainly is extremely important. And again, when I listen to my honourable colleague talk about making the phone calls and going to the Lions Club and going to the churches, I know, Mr. Chair, that he does that out of the kindness of his heart and not because it's simply his job, because that certainly is not the case. That's done on a personal commitment, and I certainly applaud my honourable colleague for all those endeavours. And I know that I would likely be safe in saying that at one point or another, Mr. Chair, we've all made some of those phone calls ourselves. And indeed, I know that my honourable colleague would agree that the hard-working frontline caseworkers make a lot of those phone calls themselves, and indeed a lot of man and woman hours go into attempting to provide as many services and needs as we can to our clientele. And I do want to indicate that we do, under the special needs portion of our budget, Mr. Chair, we do on an annual basis to the tune of approximately $20 million, Mr. Chair. We do have special needs funding, which covers a variety of situations. It could be a transportation special need, it could be a special diet, it could be eyewear or emergency dental. So there is a component available within the department's budget which addresses these special needs. And it's done through coordination with the caseworkers. And I know my honourable colleague believes, as I do, in the fine work of our caseworkers and our staff. And certainly, I know the honourable colleague would agree with me that certainly accountability and transparency is extremely important to all Nova Scotians when it comes to taxpayers' dollars. And so we want to balance the two. We want to make sure that we have accountability and transparency, and at the same time have some of that cushion for those special needs, as my honourable colleague indicated. And so that is there. So as we move forward in future budget discussions, I certainly will make sure that that remains in the forefront, that we do not lose funding for those special needs, which seem to be increasing year by year. And certainly I would also indicate that my department and government in general, we know that we are indeed but one source. We cannot be all for everyone, and we recognize that, and we do the best we can with what we have, and a $32 million increase in our overall budget this year is a bit of that recognition. And this government realizes that indeed there are good programs and good things being done through the Department of Community Services, and that $32 million increase in the budget is prime indication of that recognition. And certainly I know that there are many community groups out there who do provide assistance. I know that there are even some companies. I believe Nova Scotia Power has a program with the Salvation Army that they fund, and so we can applaud some corporate opportunities for the corporate sector to step up to the plate, and that's something that certainly will be encouraging even more. That corporate Nova Scotia and corporate Canada can indeed step up to the plate and provide assistance like that Nova Scotia Power program with Salvation Army. So we will continue to work with those stakeholders, and indeed within the parameters of our own budget, to ensure that those special needs are served, Mr. Chair.
The honourable member for Digby-Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You spoke about dental problems and special assistance for dental work. I've had people in my office with under the social assistance program, and some of the things they brought to my attention about the teeth and the work that needed to be done to those people. Just where is the line drawn when it comes to special need for the work on teeth? I mean, I had one client here not long ago, had a child, 17, 18 years old, and maybe not that old, 15, 16 years old, whatever. And that lady brought that child in, and the teeth in the gums come out so crooked that it caused infection on the inside of that person's mouth, and had been for years. But yet social assistance wouldn't look at that because they called that cosmetic. MSI wouldn't look at it because it wasn't a medical emergency. So that person with the crooked teeth, so crooked that it caused infection inside that mouth, was in a catch-22 situation. So there's a line drawn there somehow between MSI and the Department of Social Services, that there's people there, one person I know of for sure, and there must be many more. So can't that line be drawn one side, one way or the other there to get that person and probably many more help, either through MSI or through community services.
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and indeed, my honourable colleague raises a very serious question and a very serious predicament. Certainly, as I indicated earlier, through my department, we will work closely with the Department of Health, who, of course, would be the department with reference to MSI. But I am extremely pleased to be able to in these estimates and in this year's budget, indicate a 6% increase in the fees for dental work for our clientele. And indeed, under this program, approximately 7,000 clients and their beneficiaries receive this dental work, and that program is worth approximately $160,000 increase in this year's budget.
The Honourable Member for Digby Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to just touch on community housing. Again, lots of calls for services there for the low-income people on social assistance and low-income seniors. Anywhere from roofs to be fixed to windows, putting their homes, doors on, to major, and some have had some major work done, and it's very appreciative of the work that has come out of community services through housing. And but then again, there's a few people low income. I believe the cutoff mark is $19,000 for these people to apply. And you'll get some people that's $19,050 or $19,100 that don't quite make the grade for that 40 or 50 or $100, whatever they are over. And it's a pretty hard situation, you know, when you're looking for a few $1,000s for emergency grants, and that $40 or $50 takes you away from that. To keep the heat program, couple in their home are allowed $25,000 and they can receive that. Has the department ever looked into, I don't know how long this $19,000 mark has been in place, but has the department looked at increasing this maybe even to the $25,000 mark where you can apply for Keep the Heat program and receive it?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and indeed a situation that is extremely important in our communities that my honourable colleague raises, and extremely pleased, Mr. Chair, to be able to indicate that this government recognizes the importance in the home repair program. Indeed, we see over $4 million increase this year in the overall budget to over $14 million for home repairs, because we recognize that, as I had indicated earlier, Mr. Chair, Nova Scotia, because of the steep history that we have, we also have some of the oldest homes in the country. Indeed, we have more homes owned by Nova Scotians in Nova Scotia, more individual home ownership, Mr. Chair. And there's no question that that brings some challenges along with the challenges that my honourable colleague raised regarding the income levels. And I know that the repair program, in particular when it comes to seniors, has gone from $2,500 to $5,000, Mr. Chair. And that is a recognition on this government's part, and indeed all members would agree, that that enables more seniors to be able to stay in their homes, have that quality of life that they so deserve, and again, provides that not only that safety and that security for our seniors, but also offsets the demands on the health care and the home care that would be required if indeed they were to go into senior into nursing homes and hospitals and the such. So those are a couple of the issues that my honourable colleague raised. The other issue, though, in particular, Mr. Chair, when it comes to the income allowance that someone can make for an individual or a household, that is something that is regulated through CMHC and indeed through the federal guidelines. It is not within our purview, so that's something that CMHC sets, and we abide by those guidelines. And indeed, at any opportunity to negotiate better situation for Nova Scotians, Mr. Chair, my honourable colleague can rest assured I will make sure that I push in those negotiations to ensure that those unique concerns of Nova Scotians that I indicated earlier are factored into that formula set down by CMHC.
Honourable Member for Digby-Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have another situation, interesting one. Gets more interesting as it goes. No. I have a situation down home where clammers, they dig clams on the beaches. Their resource has gone down quite a bit this past few months. Years ago, when the ground fishery was better, a lot of these guys, I think, went into other fisheries. When the scalloping was better and the ground fishery was better, they would go do some ground fishing, and they diversified more. But these past few years, they're kind of stuck in one place, and that's on the beach. The beach is getting down. They have got a plan in place. They've been looking at an American plan that's worked out good for the Americans across the bay in Maine. To reseed. They got a plan to reseed their beach and bring it back and hopefully manage it a little better than before so it stays sustainable, and hopefully diversify into something else that they can't dig around the clock and around the calendar. Right now, I think we're going to see, and some has already approached the Department of Social Services, because in the Digby area, the Annapolis area, you know, we've just lost Shawwood. We've just lost the Weymouth Mill. That's shut down. The fisheries, the lobster fishery's still good yet, but that's out of season. It's not all bad, but it's not all good there either, that's for sure. And there's not a lot of jobs around. Right now, a lot of these clammers are looking for tickets out west to get out of here. There's 282 of them, matter of fact, total. There was probably 140 or 120 of them, whatever, active in the clamming. And anyway, they're in a bind, and I think community service is going to soon see them on the doorstep, a lot of them, because it's not getting any better, it's getting worse. Until they get the reseeding done by next year or two, they'll have something up and going again. But I think years back there used to be some programs, and maybe this should be directed more at Department of Transport. But I'm feeling that if these 140 people hit the doorsteps down there of community services, that it's going to be their problem too, not just transport. So is there something that could be done between transport and the Department of Community Services to help these folks out with some make work? There's lots of work in the community to be done, we know that. You could put them in the ditches to cut alders for the next year, and they'd work night and day, I'm sure, at it. But I think if there was something that community services could do there between with the Department of Transport, I know there's a lot of work to be done in that area. Some makeshift work for some of them, the ones who want to stay at home. I know a lot are going to leave, like I said, for out in Alberta, where they all seem to be getting quite rich out that way, and that's all the word you hear around rural areas now is go west, young man, and fill your pocket. So there's a lot looking for plane tickets and train tickets down there. But there's a lot looking for something to do to tide them over, even if they could, I don't believe they're going to be able to dig clams enough to get their unemployment insurance benefits this winter from the federal government. So it's something that I want to bring to the attention of community service because it's going to happen. I have got an appointment with them with the Minister of Fisheries to look at the reseeding plan. They are trying to make it a little better down the road, but in the meantime, there's going to be a problem there. And I believe that if community service could look into something like that with the Department of Transport, one way or the other, they're going to be paid, some of them, to survive there. So if there was a service in that area, there is some servicing to be done in that area, and one of them is alders in the ditches that could keep a big crew pretty busy for a long time. Is that something community services could do rather than just pay them for sitting home? They could be paid to do a service in the community?
The Honourable, the Minister of Community Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank my honourable colleague for a question that certainly touches a lot of us in rural communities. As my honourable colleague knows, I was born and raised in the Musquodoboit Valley, which is extremely, the beautiful Musquodoboit Valley, which is extremely rural. We have a large farming and forestry sector, and Mr. Chair, I certainly share my colleagues' concerns about the out-migration of some of our men and women in our rural communities. And indeed, I make my home now, Mr. Chair, in the beautiful community known as the 40s in New Ross, which relies heavily on the Christmas tree sector. And again, Mr. Chair, we're finding more and more of our young men and women looking for opportunities outside of our rural communities. And indeed, it is a challenge for not only this government and this House, but indeed a challenge for many governments today to ensure a stable economy and programming and those types of programming, Mr. Chair, that are out of the purview of my department. So I'll go back to my department specifically in recognizing my honourable colleague's concerns. And there are numerous incentives and situations that can be provided through the Department of Community Services, and indeed we do fund the Return to Work initiatives to the tune of $9 million each year, Mr. Chair, and that provides for incentives and opportunities for our men and women in our communities to indeed find gainful employment and to be able to provide for their families and have that sense of belonging and self-worth within our communities. And as well, Mr. Chair, we work with HRDC very closely with the federal government in regards to partnering and cooperation on services and programs that are available through funding through the HRDC. And a couple of other things, although it's not directly to the question of my honourable colleague, but this does exist in the department, and it's not so much about programming for jobs, but indeed it is the policy of the department to allow income assistant recipients to maintain, keep 30% of their earned income up to a certain maximum. And indeed, this year we're pleased to be able to introduce in these estimates the regulations that will provide for the income tax return for our income assistance clients to be considered earned income, thereby allowing our income assistant clients to maintain 30% of that as well. And that will be able to help numerous, more than 3,500 clients of the Department of Community Services for a total budget figure of $360,000. So there is some good news there, and indeed there are projects and opportunities available through the department that my honourable colleague had been asking about.
The honourable member for Digby Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to share the rest of my hour with my colleague from Clayton Park. Thank you.
mic on.
Okay, fine. Honourable Member of Halifax-Clayton Park.
Thank you so much. That's good, and I'll begin now. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to have a chance to talk to the new Minister of Community Services, and I know it's a very big department. As I could see, I was actually pleased to see there's a lot more in the estimates for community services than there were for a couple of the other offices and agencies that I've had an opportunity to question on. And it's certainly a broad-ranging number of issues and services that are offered through your department. I wanted to pick up a little bit on what my colleague from Digby had spoken about, and that is what we experience as MLAs in our own constituencies. And I think it's a tremendous learning curve and window on our community to realize the extent of poverty in Nova Scotia in every riding. And I know there are certain ridings of the province that one might expect that, but I can say that every riding has its share and more of poverty and hardship. And it was a surprise to me in the riding of Clayton Park to realize just how many people require assistance and come to me with some really huge problems. And it's very different than what I might have expected. And I think that it provides a window on our communities to see how many people are there. And they do come to their MLA's office usually at the point where many things have failed them, and they're in pretty bad straits when they do come to ask for our help. And as my colleague said, we very quickly become experts, or at least we hope we're becoming experts in what nonprofit agencies are out there, because it doesn't take long as a new MLA to discover that the government programs have real limitations. And I know the intent is to provide a social safety net. And my understanding as a middle-class citizen in that community was that we did have a social safety net, and it came as quite a shock to me to see just how inadequate our programs often are, and that they just are not able really to help people in the needs that they have. And there's so many specifics I could go to. We might talk first about the cost of housing in HRM as opposed to the cost of housing, as an average across the province. And this was one of the points that was raised in the Forum on Poverty that was held, I guess, I'm looking at when it was held. It was, thank you, January. I have the letter from the chair of that committee before me, a letter outlining 7 points that were raised after 2 days of basically listening to people and hearing from advocates, from people who are living in poverty, from people who know firsthand, what the experience is, and making recommendations about how programs could be changed. And the committee members in that all-party committee did try, as the minister will know, all party members that sat on that committee tried to filter through the many recommendations we heard to come up with a few that were doable. And one of them was to say, it's quite obvious that if you live in Parsborough, housing costs one thing, and if you live in Halifax, it's quite different. And if you live in Clayton Park, it's really difficult to find an apartment at $600 a month. And in fact, many of the new units that you'll see along the highway and Parkland Drive and Lacewood are $1,000 a month, and clearly out of the reach of many people. But there are not a lot of housing options. And because we set one rate for accommodation, one rate for the shelter allowance across the province, we're leaving people at a real disadvantage if the market where they reside is a lot higher. And another example of a high market would be the university towns like Wolfville or Antigonish. Because again, it's similar to Halifax in that there's a lot of students coming in, and they drive the prices up as well, shortage of available apartments. So it's not only, speaking of Halifax, but markets where the prices are higher. The recommendation from the committee was that the department look at setting a percentage of the average market price. And in the committee, we actually had said that the housing allowance should be at a rate of 85% of the rental market in that city or that jurisdiction. So I'm wondering if you could start with that when we talk about how on earth can somebody living in Halifax get their shelter for their family with the amount provided by the department and still eat. So, thank you.
Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to my honourable colleague for the opportunity to discuss the very serious and very obvious problem that certainly not just HRM clients, but indeed, as my honourable colleague indicated, the fluctuation across the province. And I referenced earlier the important work that Standing Committee on Community Services does, and the opportunity that I had to serve on that committee for even though it was just for a short time. I know that the work being done at the committee level is extremely valuable, and I had been part of the group that put those 7 suggestions forward, and upon resuming my new role as Minister of Community Services, I did go back and look at those 7 recommendations in particular. And this year we are pleased to be able to increase the shelter allowance, Mr. Chair, to my honourable colleague, of course, $15 a month for single income assistance clients effective October the 1st, and indeed $20 a month for family households effective October the 1st, as an acknowledgement that indeed we do need to be conscious of the fact that certainly rental properties, the rent certainly is increasing, and we need to try and respond to that for our clients across the province. And I will indicate as well that those are two forward increases in our programming that we're very pleased with to put forward in this estimates. But as well, I want to indicate to my honourable colleague that indeed we are reviewing quite a few policies in the department, and the one in which she spoke about is indeed one of the ones that's currently being reviewed, and that is how we do allow for the shelter allowances across the province, and indeed if there are things we can do within the policy that would make it more equitable. So I certainly want to indicate to my honourable colleague that is something that is under review, and I certainly will be paying close attention to.
Honourable Member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And to the Minister, I appreciate the fact that it's going to be reviewed. Any increase is welcome, but only yesterday I spoke to a woman who's on disability and receiving, I think, social assistance as well. Her rent's just gone up $40 a month, from $585 to $625 a month. And that's for a one-bedroom apartment in the Clayton Park riding. And that's a huge increase for anybody, on a fixed income, and certainly she's very vulnerable. And we were actually having a discussion of, she feels we need rent control, so I guess we have to talk to someone else about that. That's not in your purview. But at any rate, people are suffering. Rents are going up every month in the city. My other concern with the shelter allowance is that so many of your clients are families, and they're often headed by women. And in those cases, what the women are often forced to do is to use their child tax benefits that they're getting from the federal government to supplement this housing allowance or shelter allowance. And you'll find time and again that they're in arrears with their rent until that check comes in, and then they catch up on their rent and power bills. The amount of money and I just think it's important for the Minister to hear it, and I know she'll hear it time and again from staff, from clients, from other MLAs, but it is so important to look clearly at how can a family with that allowance that they're given, the total budget they are given, possibly make ends meet and keep healthy. And they are doing it right now as a result of using their federal money that's coming in, which was never intended for that purpose, right? It's intended that they have winter clothes or boots or, the exceptional costs that come up around schooling and those sort of things. So, they basically are very, very, they're forced to take that money, redirect it to basic costs, and that shows that our system is not properly covering the costs of looking after their family. And in the same regard, I'd like to reference a study that was done, and it was a professor at Mount St. Vincent University, and the results were just made clear very recently. And what they did was a study of what it costs in Nova Scotia to have a healthy, balanced diet for a family of 4. And you may be aware of that. I don't have the exact name in front of me, but I'm sure your staff are aware as well. What they looked at was just a basket of food, a basic basket of food for healthy eating if you were a family of 4, and the amount they came up with was over $500 a month, something like $525 in that vicinity. And then they compared it to what would that family of 4 receive if they were on social assistance in our province. And the shortfall is about 50%. The amount available for the family on social assistance was about $225. And perhaps your staff have the exact figures, but I know my estimates are pretty close. It was essentially that they were short by half the amount of money they need to eat well. And you know, there are so many other health problems that come if you don't have proper nutrition. We've talked about children being overweight. We've talked about them having dental problems. You know, you have to have a healthy diet in order to sustain your health. And so I'm wondering if the minister or the department had a response to that study to look at that and say, clearly, we are really, you know, we're failing to help these families. Thank you.
Minister of Community Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank my honourable colleague for the opportunity to discuss the issue that she raises. And indeed, if I am referencing the same study that she is, yes, certainly we are in receipt of that study, and certainly recognize that you know, poverty is certainly a very complex issue, and this study is, of course, one tool that we can use to examine where we are on a national scale, and how we are best responding to the needs of our clientele. And I know that the issues that my honourable colleague raises are serious and very important to all members of this House. And indeed, there are numerous programs that are available. So it's not just about a personal income assistance allowance increase or a shelter allowance increase, but it's the whole package. The National Child Benefit that my honourable colleague referenced, the Nova Scotia Child Benefit that we have in place in Nova Scotia to maximize families with children and assist with that. The other programs that we have, the pharmacare program that I'm pleased to be bringing forth in this estimate and in this budget that will help 33,000 Nova Scotian children, and indeed their families, with the costs of medicines and prescriptions that before would have had to come out of that same pot of dollars that we are now taking from that pot and allowing those dollars to be used for some of the programs or some of the expenses that hadn't been allowed for before, and indeed the child care. My honourable colleague mentioned the fact that we have families and perhaps single moms who have children who make it even more difficult to make those ends meet, and that's why it was so important in this 10-year sustainable child care plan that we brought forward that 550 portable, subsidized child care spaces can be provided. Now, that in itself is another way for us to maximize what resources we have available to us and provide yet another avenue for our clientele. Of course, we have employment supports and certainly through our housing, the first phase of our housing project in cooperation in conjunction with the federal government, and now this second phase that we'll enter into. There are multiple, and I know my honourable colleague knows those, and perhaps we'll have an opportunity to discuss some of those at length.
Honourable Member for Halifax-Clayton Park.
Thank you very much, and I appreciated the minister touching on many other areas as well. But you know, food security was the issue in particular, and I think the minister is well aware of the shortfall in that area. And yes, there are other programs that could be accessed to hopefully to cover it, but the one she missed was the food bank. And if we didn't have the food banks in every single community in this province, we would be in dire straits. And they can't always provide what's really needed either. But you know, one of the members today referenced going to the food bank and bringing food to one of their constituents, and honestly, that again comes back to our knowledge that's acquired very quickly about what is available in our community that can fill in the blanks and fill in the gaps when power's being cut off, when people are short money to pay essential bills. So, you know, and food, of course, is how much more essential can you get? So, you know, I think it just points to the fact, and I'm fully aware, and I think the minister would be, you know, probably is thinking, well, we only have so much money to go around, and I know that. But we do have to identify the most pressing needs and try and move forward with them. Because if we support families now, if we allow the children to be raised in some sort of security, we'll have a lot better second generation as well. And that's really what it is an investment in those families. So I think it is really important that we look at it. While we're talking about social assistance, income support, I want to talk about the telephone service, which was one of the recommendations of that committee recommendation. It was also something that I'd had representation in my office about from some social workers who are studying at Dalhousie University. And as one of their projects, they had looked at social assistance and felt that that would be one of the most meaningful changes you could make. And that was to introduce telephone service as an essential service. And what's ironic, Mr. Chair, to the minister, what I find truly ironic is that the basis of our income support program is that people should be looking for work and that we expect them to be job hunting. And if we expect them to be job hunting, then they really have to have a phone. And the phones are only available now if you have a medical extenuating circumstance. But the cost of basic phone service has consistently come down over time. I'm not expecting that you would have any of the bells and whistles or any of the frills, but the cost to have a basic phone service is not unreasonable. It's in fact much cheaper than it was in years gone by. And I'd like to ask the minister why the department continues to leave telephone service out of their estimation of costs.
Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And indeed, that was suggestion number 5 that came forward from the Standing Committee. And when we look at the overall budget and the different components, my honourable colleague raised the issue of employability and how can we expect people to be ready for employment if they don't have the telephone service. And indeed, we do provide through the employment support program for those individuals, those clients who've gone through that program who are employment ready. We do provide that as part of that program. So indeed, that is factored in there. And so that's a positive, Mr. Chair. I do know that where health and safety is involved, the department does provide telephone service. And that, of course, all members would agree is of the utmost importance where health and safety is concerned. And Mr. Chair, I would never say that one program is more important than another, but the $13 to $15 million price tag that goes along with the telephones is indeed a hefty price tag. And so we provide it for the health and safety, we provide it for the employment support, employment-ready clients, and Mr. Chair, we will continue to revisit and reevaluate all policies within the department.
Time allotment has been completed. I'd like to welcome to the floor the Honourable Member for Cape Breton Nova.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much. And I may switch on something here, but first of all, I'd like to ask the Minister a question concerning when she just talked about the telephones and for low-income families. But I find in this Department of Community Services, when you walk into that office, there's nothing that a client or somebody that's in need of community services can pick up a brochure and say that I'm entitled to this. There's nothing in that department. Unless you know the policy, you cannot walk into the office of any community service department at Cape Breton Island and pick up a brochure and say, I'm diabetic, I may need special needs or special medicine. I'll give you an example. In my riding, I'll give you a quick example. In my riding, there was a man that had to take his daughter to North Sydney for medical purposes. So he says, look, I'm a little short on my food this month because I had to take my daughter to transportation. The caseworker tells them that, here the caseworker says, well, you were entitled to transportation. Well, I don't know that. Another client said, well, I was entitled to clothing. I'm going to start a job. There's nothing, when you walk into that department, you cannot pick up something and say, I'm a single mother with 2 children, what am I entitled to? There's actually nothing in that department that enables that. So how do clients know what they're entitled to when they walk in and they're not told by the department staff? I think that something should be in that department when they walk in that door. If I'm a single mother with 3 kids, if I'm a single parent, a male with 3 kids, or whatever happens, what am I entitled to? There is nothing in the Department of Community Services that tells them what they're entitled to. And I'd like to know the minister's opinion on when you walk into the department and you're down and out on your luck and you're afraid. Sometimes you don't want to go there. You have to beg people to go there. But there's actually, I remember my first cases that there was a young girl that had got a job at Wendy's, and she needed a pair of non-stick shoes. And the department, she couldn't get the job because they wouldn't pay for the shoes. And I called the caseworker supervisor, because I'm no longer allowed to speak to caseworkers because of my advocacy on behalf of these people. So I understand that they said, so I said to the caseworker supervisor, if she got this job making $130 a week, that's $8,000 a year that you won't have to pay her because she'll be working for an $80 pair of shoes. But I mean, she did not understand because she was mentally challenged. You know, there's nothing in that department. I'm just wondering if the minister is going to look at something in her department where actually people walk into that department and can have an idea of what they're entitled to. Thank you.
Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and to my honourable colleague, I welcome the question because it's very interesting. Upon being named Minister of Community Services, I certainly didn't understand the full realm of the department. I understood what I had dealt with through my own MLA experiences, but one of the first things that I said to the communications staff was that I would like for them to prepare for me an analysis of a marketing campaign that would do something along the very lines as what you're indicating. So make available for our clientele, make available for the stakeholders and those Nova Scotians that we service something that would do that and maybe even more. Provide them with the contacts, provide them with the avenues and the options that they have ahead of them. So certainly that's something that I will commit to my honourable colleague that I will continue to investigate and move forward. So along with the brochures that are available now, the single individual brochures and the information on the website, I will make sure that we move forward with that marketing campaign suggestion to make sure that all the programs that can be made available, certainly our clients are well aware of them.
Honourable Member of Cape Breton Nova.
Thank you, Minister. Also, that's a very good idea. I think it's important because that's a major complaint, is because communication among the clients and among the caseworkers. But in my case, in the office of the provincial building in Sydney, Nova Scotia, I'm just wondering if the policy across the department is that there's one caseworker in that department that handles single parent families. Is that a norm across all the province, or is it just the Sydney office where there's one caseworker that handles single parent families? And I forget the acronym that they use, but in this office they have one caseworker designated to handle. I want to know if that's true or not true. Thank you.
Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And indeed, just verifying that it depends on the size of the office and the caseload of that office. And I believe in the office that you're referring, there is one caseworker who is responsible for those clients, but that's not the norm. It depends on the size of the workload and the office itself.
Honourable Member of Cape Breton Nova.
That's what I thought. I thought that was strictly restricted to the Sydney office where they have one caseworker that handles single parents. And sometimes we wonder about when that happens, when you have one caseworker with all these different things. I could go on here and talk about the overworked caseworkers in the department at work. They have caseloads, and I know that for a fact. That's a big part of my office since I've been elected, was dealing with those issues. So it's important that, we do try to spread that around, because sometimes with that stress of dealing with single parent families and single people all the time, that I find sometimes, actually, as an elected official, when somebody comes in my office, if I can look at that person, I can tell them who the caseworker is when they come in my door. I know who that caseworker is and that person. And then I started to put it together. Well, why do I know it's that caseworker? Then I realized that these were all single people that were coming in my door. That's how I put it together. That's how I know that this is not public knowledge, that this one caseworker handles single parents. The reason I knew this was because I was getting the complaints all the time, and I put it together that each and every time I had a complaint, it was because it was a single parent, and it was a single person. That was by this one caseworker. So that's why I knew and put this together, that's the office handles. That's the only office in the province that handles single people. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I do know, because I kept putting it together, why am I getting the same caseworker all the time? And that's why. And I knew there was something wrong why I was getting that caseworker's name. Now I'm going to switch over now to the minister. I'm going to ask the minister about some of my critic area, which is housing. And first thing I'd like to ask is that I heard you speaking earlier on phase 1 completed. I do know exactly they spent $37.26 million in that phase. And the minister, I'm wondering 2 questions here. How many units were built in phase 1 in the province of Nova Scotia? And how many units were built in Cape Breton under that phase?
Honorable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And a couple of things before I get directly to the answer.